Now, the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission is reporting $5.06 billion of investments for the first half of 2020, and that's 67% less than the value in the first half of 2019, which was estimated at $15.15 billion. According to the NIPC, the decline is consistent with expected downward pressure on investment flows, given the negative global economic impact of COVID-19. We're now being joined by the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, Ms. Yewande Sadiku, for more insights on this inflows. Good morning, Ms. Sadiku. Thanks for joining us on the program. Well, let's begin the conversation with you talking us through the direct impacts of COVID-19 in the investment space.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Direct impact across the world is downward pressure on investment flows. For most investors, about 50% of the amounts reinvested year on year comes from the profits that companies make. With the economic impact of COVID-19, many companies will not make the kind of profits that they made in the previous year. So that's the first reason. The restrictions on travel for many countries across the world also means that transactional deals that came from those travels will be reduced. So UNCTAD estimated in March that there will be a 30 to 40% decline in FDI numbers for 2020-2021 relative to the numbers for 2019. As COVID has continued its disease spread across the world, the expectation is that those numbers will be even lower than were originally budgeted. And I expect when they update their estimates, we'll see that reflected. In the same way that when the IMF updated its numbers in June, it reflected a much greater economic impact than was originally estimated in April and than was estimated in January.
Now, you identified 34 projects across 16 states of the Federation, including the FCT and the Niger Delta region from January to June 2020. But can we get a breakdown of these projects and the states' governments concerned?
So the numbers that you speak to are actually not investment. The numbers relate to investment announcements. Usually announcements come before investment. Those announcements don't then need to be supported to transfer them to actual investment. But the largest number that we recorded in the first half of the year was from 328 Support Services in transportation. This is a U.S. company relating to an investment in Kaduna, and that was for $2 billion. MTN South Africa made an announcement about additional investment in their sector in January that also came to about $1.6 billion. Africa Industries Group made an announcement for mining and quarrying in Kaduna for about $600 million. And then Savannah Petroleum made an announcement for about $390 million. Those are the largest numbers. In terms of states, the biggest state that we expect investments to go to first was Kaduna for about $2.61 billion. Lagos had $220 million. Nasarawa had $60 billion. Ekiti had $50 billion. And there were a couple of other states. And in terms of the sources of those announcements, the bulk of them for this first half came from the USA. 43% of the investments were from US investors, 32% from South Africa. In terms of domestic investment, that represented about 16% and then 8% for the UK. Those are the highlights. But the full report is available for download from the NIPC website.
All right. Ms. Sadiku, I'm sure many would like to know what are the sectors impacted by these investments and what do we know about the origin of the inflows?
What we see from COVID, not unexpectedly, is that there are winners and they're losers. Obviously, some sectors are materially affected in the negative in the same way that opportunities are presented for several. I'll start with the ones that relate to opportunities. In pharmaceuticals and in chemicals, in food and beverages, in health services, in ICT, in e-commerce, we're seeing a material uptick in consumer activity and therefore in investment. And we've seen a number of Nigerian companies retooling shifting from what they manufactured traditionally, to new sectors. 7-Up Bottling Company, for instance, now makes sanitizers. Emzor Pharmaceuticals now makes face masks and sanitizers. And there's a company that was making clothes before, uniforms and the like, called Ziria Apparel, that got into the manufacture of PPE. Those material business lines are different from what they were doing before. In terms of those that have suffered materially, many of them, many of us will be familiar with. The transport sector in many ways, particularly in the context of aviation, entertainment and tourism has also suffered materially. Real estate and construction in many ways. But we're in the process now at NIPC, working with some of our colleagues in government, particularly with the National Bureau of Statistics and the Nigerian Institute for Social and Economic Research, to do a deep dive to better understand, empirically the potential losers and the potential winners, so that government policies can be directed, in the first instance for the winners, to ensure that the bottlenecks that prevent those sectors and companies from flourishing are removed. And for the potential losers, to find avenues for better supporting them to cope through this difficult period.
Now, let's talk about the authenticity of the investment announcements. Now, of course, the NIPC did not independently verify the announcements, but you look to track the progress of the projects going forward. Now, talk to us about the plans to realize that goal.
Sorry, can you repeat that? For some reason, I didn't hear you well.
I was talking about the fact that NIPC did not independently verify the authenticity of the investment announcements, but of course you're looking to track the progress of these projects. So tell us about the plans on how you intend to realize that goal.
Fantastic. NIPC is located in Abuja. We have 5 zonal offices. From those locations, clearly we don't have the capacity to cover Nigeria fully. So we believe completely in working with our partners at state level, the state investment promotion agencies, to deepen our reach and to deepen the support that we provide on a state-by-state basis. So we spent a lot of effort, particularly in this half year, on engaging with our colleagues at state level so that they better understand and we can work more collaboratively in converting these announcements to investments. We also continue with our engagements with different
All right, we'll get back to Ms. Sadiku in just a moment, but let's just do a quick recap of some of the headlines we brought to you earlier on. Now, the Federal Executive Council yesterday approved the establishment of a 75 billion naira Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, and that's to help create a financial support base for persons between the ages of 18 and 35 in the country. And the Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dari, explains that the initiative will help to create a special window for accessing credit facilities and financing of ideas, innovations, and support youth enterprise. Now, this fund is the first ever to be approved specifically for youth and will be distributed through microcredit banks in the country. The minister says that the fund will be assessed by youths directly once they are able to present their ideas. Now let's continue the conversation with the Executive Secretary of the NIPC, Ms. Yewande Sadiku. So I was going to ask you, within the second quarter of 2020 now, we've seen more capital flight as a result of COVID-19. Do we have any record of those?
No, it's not one of the benchmarks that we track. But the expectation, across the world, as I first mentioned, is that foreign direct inflows will decline. We think, though, and we see from engagements that we expect an uptick in domestic direct investments. I mean, many countries are doing this as well, encouraging their nationals to invest inward, particularly in areas that they consider to be basic or to be fundamental to their needs in that country. So we expect, as the year progresses, those conversations with Nigerian investors looking to invest more in the country. We expect many more of those conversations to materialize. We also think that domestic capital agreements for direct investors, but in the context of portfolio and other investors, we see expectations of greater participation.
Now, given the decline in inflows lately, what are your economic recovery strategies to renew investors' confidence and, of course, attract more FDIs post-COVID-19?
In terms of economic recovery, I mean, we believe very strongly in working with other agencies. The first thing that we need to do in Nigeria, because there's an expectation of a flight to quality, is that the work that we're doing in the area of making it easier to do business in Nigeria needs to take on even greater urgency. Then we find that in the years that Nigeria attracted the most capital, it was because of bold and coherent policy measures from government that then created opportunities for investors. Everything from banking sector reforms to the sale of oil and gas assets and the telco reforms. We believe that similar reforms will be necessary to drive the kind of investor activity that we expect. But given the feedback that we've got from investors, it is important that there's a coherence amongst government agencies of what those policy measures are so that they're credible, so that it is clear that they're coordinated and that they reflect what I will call an all-of-government commitment to investment retention and attraction. Then a number of our policies relating to particularly portfolio and direct investors, there needs to be a coherence in how we attract and we manage them, recognizing that both investors, act as a continuum on a spectrum, on an investment spectrum in terms of tenor and volumes and the like.
Ms. Sadiku, now let's talk about the Pioneer Status Incentives Program, which is aimed to resuscitate the economy from the recession of 2016. What has been the success of that initiative?
The Pioneer Status Incentive was aimed at helping investors in many ways, encourage them given the challenges of breaking ground in new sectors in Nigeria. On a quarterly basis, we publish information on the applications process and the like to give Nigerians full information on what we're doing. We've been through a reform, and we think another set of reforms is necessary, where we look at the impact that the incentive has had over the years on the expectations that the country had for opening up new sectors, for encouraging investments, deep investments in multiple ones. And when that work is done, we expect some amendments to the scheme, some amendments possibly to the sectors.
So can we have an update on the Pioneer Status Incentive Report, especially for the second quarter of 2020? All right, we lost Ms. Sadiku again, but let's see if we'll be able to reconnect with her again in just a moment. And that's earlier on. We also mentioned the fact that the Senate has passed the bill to repeal and reenact the Banks and Other Official Institutions Act 2004, and that's in a bid to strengthen Nigeria's financial system. The passage of that bill follows the public hearing by the Senate Committee on Banking, Insurance and Other Financial Institutions on Wednesday, July the 15th, to consider the opinions of stakeholders in the industry. Now, that bill, which is sponsored by Senator Obasani and co-sponsored by Senator Betty Joycelyn, seeks to regulate banking and businesses of other financial institutions by prohibiting the carrying on of such businesses in the country. Now, recently, the Central Bank, in its presentation at the public hearing, pushed for a review of the framework for managing failing institutions, and that's a restriction remedy for successful action against revocation of licenses in line with international standards. Ms. Sadiku is back with us now to continue the conversation. Well, we'll be winding down in just a moment, but tell us, I was asking earlier on that you should give us an update of the Pioneer Status Incentives Report, especially for the second quarter of 2020.
Okay. So the number of applications that we expect approval for pioneer status in 2020, I expect to be lower than what we saw in the previous year. First, because of the lockdown for a material period, and because the approval of the incentive itself requires first presentations by prospective applicants and then visits to those site locations. So we actually expect lower numbers in 2020 than we saw in previous years. But for the second half of 2020, we expect to be an improvement over the first half. I don't have the numbers directly for the first half of the year available, but I can give you a summary of what we did from 2017 to 2019. I believe that in the year 2019, we received 100 applications, out of which 27 were approved. Compared to 2018, we got 31 approvals out of 95 applications. The number of applications for 2020 so far have been in the region of maybe 50 odd. And in terms of the number of approvals, I believe across the first half of this year, we probably had about 12 approvals in total.
Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, Ms. Yewande Sadiku, would like to thank you for sharing some of your time with us. All right, we will be analyzing the latest burning and economic issues in the domestic commodities markets when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us.